All right, good evening, everyone. I think we're going to start the session. We're at 6:30 here already. There might be some people walking in a little later, but I think it's better to have all the limited time afforded to us to have a conversation here. So good evening and welcome to our side event entitled What Happens After the VLR? My name is Kyle Wiebe, and I am from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, the IISD, where we have been working to help communities track, monitor, and manage local data towards the SDGs through dashboards, which support the creation of VLRs. I will be co-moderating this session with my colleague Yatsuka Kateoka, who is the program director of the City Task Force at IGES, the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies. As you are all aware, VLRs have become a key pillar of SDG implementation and localization. While the SDGs are global in their ambition, their achievement requires local action and leadership, and VLRs are a means to showcasing this work and accelerating the localization process. Every year, more and more cities from around the world are voluntarily taking the bold step to report globally how their communities are becoming healthier, more equitable, and more sustainable, all while assessing their progress against local priorities within the SDG context. Not only is it encouraging to see an increasing number of cities around the world engaging in SDG localization, we can also see that the quality of VLR's reporting is improving, as more cities are developing strong frameworks to integrate local SDG priorities into their development planning. We are also seeing an increase in the number of technical resources available to cities who are considering the VLR process. However, and perhaps what is most exciting, is that we're now also seeing an increasing number of cities producing 2 or more VLRs, or at least stating their intentions to do so in the near future. And I believe it's safe to say that these cities are seeing the significant benefits to engaging with the SDGs at the local level. But despite the emergence of VLRs and the success of SDG localization, we are all aware that more needs to be done. And so, today, at the halfway mark towards the 2030 agenda, we think it's important to discuss and share the positive impacts we've seen and to reflect on questions such as what transformations are we seeing through SDG localization and the VLRs? How can we overcome barriers such as access to local data? How can we leverage partnerships and engage stakeholders? And how can we accelerate action and growth and grow the network of cities producing VLRs? So to answer these questions, we are honored to have with us today, both virtually and in person, representatives from cities who have localized the SDGs and produced VLRs, as well as panelists from organizations that work closely with local and regional governments in support of their efforts to advance SDG localization. So the format for today's side event will begin with a compilation of recorded contributions from representatives that were not able to join us in person, unfortunately. And then afterwards, we will invite our in-person panelists to share and reflect on a few questions about their experiences with the VLRs and SDG localization, before then turning it to you, the audience, for questions and comments. So without further ado, I'm now going to ask my colleague, Matt, to play 2 pre-recorded statements from representatives who have completed VLRs. And these recordings come to us from Ms. Barbara Pons-Giner, Commissioner for Strategic Projects and the 2030 Agenda of the Barcelona City Council, as well as Mr. Masahiro Nishikawa, Director of Office of the City of Yokohama, Representative to the Americas. And in producing these recordings, we asked these speakers to share their thoughts on 3 questions, which are: what are the main and long-lasting impact of localizing the SDGs? How are their plans to continue SDG localization efforts going? And what are their next steps? Samantha, if I could get you to play those videos, please.
The publication of the first New York Voluntary Local Review in 2018, which reflected the adoption of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, as a crucial policy framework by progressive cities across the world, was a spark that led to the setting up of a task force for the localization of the 2030 Agenda, which means the creation of the 2030 Agenda of Barcelona. We did this work between 2019 and 2020, standing on the shoulders of giants, in the sense that we could make use of the great planning tradition of the Barcelona City Council. In some cases, we just picked up the targets and the corresponding indicators. In others, we created them through bilateral agreements. The main task left us was to connect the dots and ensure consistency of the result. So far, we have published 3 voluntary local reviews, available in 3 languages in our website. In each edition, we have tried to introduce new contents and improvements. The budgetary alignment, for example, which is no easy task. As for the citizen engagement, we must consider that, traditionally, in Barcelona city planning, this means planning with the city agents and the neighbors. Barcelona has a remarkable array of participatory organs, which in the last years have been complemented, also challenged by ad hoc participatory processes and open source digital participation platform called Decidim Barcelona, which has been exported to many cities in different countries, and which has also has made possible the appointment of Barcelona as the European Capital of Democracy in 2023 and 2024. However, we have undertaken several dissemination projects from the 2030 Agenda Office. We have created an annual conference in which we also deliver the 2030 Agenda Barcelona Awards to institutions, private firms, and citizen organizations that have made outstanding contributions to the SDGs in Barcelona and its metropolitan region. Now, coincident with the midterm of the agenda, which will be celebrated at the international and national level, and with the election of a new municipal government in Barcelona for the next 4 years, Barcelona wants to make a qualitative leap in its 2030 agenda. We are aware that the SDGs are no more, if they have ever been, a matter of consensus. There are absurd criticisms basing on conspiracy theories, but also a healthy skepticism about its real social value. This is why we are facing 2 main challenges at this time. On the one hand, we want to update and improve the agenda and the VLRs, because a positive consequence of our work has been the alignment of almost all municipal and metropolitan plans to the 2030 horizon and the SDGs. These plans incorporate, in many cases, for the first time, specific and quantitative targets that allows us to measure how we are improving. But now, the challenge we face is that we have to incorporate this, and we have to link the agenda in a stronger way to the policies and services that most impact the daily life of the people in Barcelona. We have written, in order to do so, a midterm report that should be a relevant input for the new government for identifying priorities and make progress in improving the life of all Barcelonians. On the other hand, we are very aware that the main challenges that Barcelona has as a city and that shares with many global cities are basically inequalities, which translate into access to decent jobs and decent housing, and the climate change. And both of these challenges can only be solved at the metropolitan level with a larger perspective. This is why we want to introduce the metropolitan and multi-level dimension to the agenda in a much stronger and consequent way. We hope with these improvements that will take place in the next months, the 2030 agenda will continue to be a strong tool to improve the life of people in Barcelona. Thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to be invited to participate in this session, organized as an official side event of High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. I'd like to thank International Institute for the Sustainable Development, IISD, and Institute for the Global Environmental Studies, IGES, for giving us these opportunities to share our experience and practice on SDGs advancement through our VLR. Yokohama published VLR 2 years ago, strongly inspired by the discussion in the SDGs Leadership Cities Network led by the Brookings institutions. Through the dialogues with Vanguard cities in the network, we recognize the 3 essential aspects to the VLRs. First, VLR as a city management process. The process of conducting a VLR itself presents a considerable value. The assessing our SDGs efforts provides the opportunities to develop even better urban initiatives. VLRs also function as a communication tool for sharing experience and knowledge among cities. A medium to share each city's systems and know-how can help effectively achieve the SDGs around the world. Finally, as cities, we can assume the leadership role in launching a global movement by committing to a VLR. Cities will play an essential role to achieve the SDGs, and we need more cities to commit. VLRs will trigger a cascade of the city's voices and actions on the global stage. Yokohama unveiled its VLR at the Asia Smart City Conference, where city representatives, government officials, academia, and companies, mainly from Asia, get together to share and discuss urban problems and solutions every year. We took that step because we believe strongly that VLRs can promote city-to-city collaboration for SDGs advancement. Even before the launch of a VLR, Yokohama had been engaging in international cooperation through public-private partnerships, which we call Whiteboard Program. It aims to help address urban issues faced by the cities in the Southeast Asia. Through this program, the city of Yokohama has supported projects in a variety of fields to address urban issues in emerging countries. For example, it has helped install the plastic recycling plant in Cebu, Philippines, and introduce high-efficiency pumps at the waterworks facilities in Da Nang, Vietnam. And now, we see that the VLR could be a useful tool for urban development management in emerging cities, since it could allow the city to review those projects comprehensively and could be useful to attract more green investment. We are now supporting the efforts of Da Nang, Vietnam, one of the Whiteboard partner cities, on how to utilize the VLR as a tool to collaborate with other international stakeholders and to solve their urban problems. When it comes to the climate change, which is one of the global issues addressed in SDGs 13, Yokohama has set a goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, aiming to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% compared to 2013 levels by 2030. To date, we have assisted in drafting master plans to guide climate change policy in Bangkok, Thailand, and Da Nang, Vietnam. Both cities have made their own declaration to achieve carbon neutral by 2050 in collaboration with Yokohama. By expanding and promoting these challenging initiatives at the local level, Yokohama is further accelerating efforts towards decarbonization globally. In addition, with our eyes on the SDGs target year of 2030, we are hosting the Green Expo 2027, a world-class horticulture exhibition. This expo will enable us to share a vision of how we can live in harmony with the environment in ways that integrate the SDGs, climate change countermeasures, and carbon neutral lifestyles, as well as urban development that combines nature and advanced technologies to change the world through a green transformation. The expo will also be an opportunity to showcase nature-based solutions and share a powerful message from Yokohama to the global community. As the leader of the city, home to 3.7 million people, City of Yokohama will continue to work together with our diverse partners and strive to help advancement of SDGs globally. Let us all remain committed to accelerating these critical efforts together to build a brighter future. Thank you.
I know both presenters would have loved to be here in person, but we're grateful for their contributions via video. I would now like to direct the conversation to our in-person panelists today, and in doing so, I'm going to hand it over to Yatsuga Karaoka.
Thank you very much, Carl, for your introductions. Again, my name is Yatsuka Kataoka from the Institute for Global Environment Strategies, called IGES. So thank you very much for the distinguished panelists to come here, although you are busy schedules and then tired from the long flights. And then, I would like to introduce the three panelists in front. So first, Mrs. The Mariana Cammisa, International Cooperation Manager of the Buenos Aires City Government. And then the next one is the Mr. Vrbanovic. Is that correct? Okay. Yes, Mayor of the Kitchener, Canada, and then he has a chapeau of the UCLG co-president. So thank you very much for coming. And then finally, the Mr. Reynald Maeda, the executive director, UN Association Tanzania. So we are expecting one more panelist, but he may be still on the way. So I would like to start the panel discussions. So first, I would like to ask the first question to each panelist. The first thing I'd like to ask Mariana for your interventions. So I think the Buenos Aires is one of the leading cities in VLR experiences, which has already done 4 consecutive VLRs since 2019, and then I heard today you launched, this year's Voluntary Review, 5th Voluntary Local Reviews. Congratulations on that. And then please tell us your VLR experiences. Maybe if I may ask to focusing on what has been the most powerful impacts of producing Voluntary Local Review in your cities. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you all for the invitation. It's really an honor for us being here. IGES was the first institution to publish our VLR, so it's feeling a kind of full circle, and finally meeting you all in person. As you said, we published our first VLR in 2019. We were one of the first cities to do so. We didn't know how to do it. We were starting from zero. And it started with a movement with New York City the year before being the first city to publish it, and I think 2 Japanese cities, right? Then we got an invitation from Helsinki. The mayor invited our mayor to publish our VLR. We were preparing another document. It was a localization plan. It was very similar, and the process of doing it was the same, very methodological, very evidence-based, a lot of work behind with government departments. We had over 200 indicators. It was just, translating it into a different document. So the first thing we did was analyze our government plan, our 2015-2019 government plan, to see what we were already doing for the SDGs. From that first analysis, we discovered that we were working towards 60 or 61 targets, and that included 27 government areas. And this is where the trial and error started, right? The difference between these government departments was very big. So there were departments that we needed to explain what an indicator was. Then we have other departments that had their own statistic unit, like the Ministry of Education. So what we decided to do is bring the national focal point into this process, and also we had a great support from UNDP Argentina to start building capacity into the city to be able to produce, at the time, our localization plan, then the VLR. So we called for an interministerial meeting, and here I think it's very important how this cross-cutting focal point is for localizing the SDGs. That's what we do at the Secretary General and International Relations. And also explaining why it's important that the city reports on the SDGs, why is it important to have evidence-based data. We did have an advantage that Buenos Aires has a really strong planification and result-based system, management system. So we weren't starting from scratch, right? So we called this meeting, we started working with them, then we did bilateral meetings with each department. But in the process, as you said, many things came up. And these are the opportunities that the process of the VLR, I think, gives you. So when we were analyzing the government plan, we realized that the city didn't have many indicators or data, let's say, related to gender. We were only focusing on, let's say, physical autonomy or violence. So a parallel process started to create the Buenos Aires Gender Indicator System that has now over 90 indicators. Many of them are all aligned with the SDG 5 targets, and we took the conceptual framework from the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean that divides women's autonomy in 3 dimensions: physical, economic, and in decision-making. We also started producing data of our management. How are we doing in terms of gender and leadership, let's say, in the government? And not only in the executive branch, but also in the legislative one, the judicial one. So all of these formed our gender strategy that works towards making Buenos Aires a more equal city for men and women. So with all of these processes, we also started some participatory process with other stakeholders regarding SDG 16, SDG 11. Those are the most that we contribute to. Buenos Aires has a really huge process of social and urban integration of vulnerable neighborhoods. And I think that really shows how we try to cross-cut all of the agenda, not just, let's say, SDG 1 with access to public services or SDG 11 in terms of housing, but how we try to make it comprehensive, also including education, economic development, well-being. So all of these we try to summarize into our VLRs. This last one that we freshly published today, it's kind of a special one because it's the end of our administration. And what we usually do is report the SDGs prioritized by the high-level political forum. So, you know, not all of 17. But we thought a good way to finish this process was to, okay, this is how we're doing in 16, actually, out of the 17 SDGs. We don't work with SDG 14 because we don't have jurisdiction over the sea. So that's also how you adapt to the local authority, right? So I invite you all to see our VLR. It's in buenosaires.gov.r/Agenda 2030. And of course, reach out, tell us what you think about it. If you think there's any way we can improve it, that's how we've been learning over the years and how to improve our process.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for your sharing the very insightful experiences, and then the VRS is kind of give the opportunity of the filling gaps and also advancing the sustainability planning in your cities. So thank you very much for your interventions. So now I'd like to ask the Mayor Billy, can I say Billy-san? And then could you tell me about somehow the Kitchener's localizations of SDGs, and also as a kind of chapeau of the UCLGs, what do you see the VLRs? What are the benefits of VLRs to bringing in the SDG localization?
Absolutely wonderful, and thank you, Yatsuka, and it's certainly a real pleasure to be able to join all of you as we have this discussion and begin a week long of important conversations at this midpoint of the SDGs. I guess I've had the privilege, because of my role or different roles at UCLG, to have been around the table since the inception of the SDGs back in 2015, and when, as local governments, we were arguing or advocating, I guess I should say, that to make sure that beyond actually having local governments as a cross-cutting theme across all the SDGs, in fact, that we wanted to see an SDG dedicated specifically to cities and communities, and eventually we're successful in SDG 11 being included around the sustainable cities and communities. Just prior to that, actually, I mean, I've been on city council for many years, but just prior to that, I was elected mayor in my city in late 2014. And with my UCLG involvement and the adoption of the SDGs, I felt a responsibility to actually, bring that home and walk the talk. In the sense that if we're going to be speaking about this, well, this is a great thing and cities should be included, well, we actually need to do something about that. And so as we embraced our new, it was obviously a gradual process, and we started working on our next strategic plan, which ended up being in the 2019 to 2023 timeframe, where for the first time we actually included the SDGs within the strategic plan of the city. And not only did we do that in the city of Kitchener, but we're actually part of a broader region that includes 2 other cities, Cambridge and Waterloo, as well as the regional government. We were able to convince them to include the SDGs in their strategic plans as well. And as time went on, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, of which United Cities and Local Governments is part of, certainly embraced it as part of the work that our Canadian government was doing in encouraging cities to adopt them and engage with them and localize them. And so we saw some cities across the country start including the SDGs in their strat plans and working at localizing them. Although I will say it's the one thing, as because I have this global lens, I think we as a country could have collectively done more to localize them in comparison to some other countries. Particularly at the local government level. Where it's been really impressive is at the college and university level, and even at the grade schools through the SDSN network and others who have done a great job. And in fact, just this past year, did a great week at college and universities around the SDGs. Which is something that hopefully we'll be able to build on going forward. But in terms of our own city, like I say, it was included in it was part of our strategic plan 2019 to 2023, which was the last 4-year cycle in a 20-year cycle. And so we're now in the process of developing the new 20-year strategic plan and vision, and the new the first 4 years of that plan. And the SDGs are very much being ingrained in that. And later on, as we talk about sort of the future and next steps, I'll get into some of the work we're doing with the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development as part of that plan. But overall, as a city, as we've done that work, we've also partnered with a number of other partners, including the World Council on City Data, where we've been using data and have received our Platinum ISO designation. We were part of the and continue to be part of the Bloomberg Harvard program. So as a mayor, I had the opportunity to participate a couple of years ago. We were part of the first data class that they had 2 years ago. They just had the second one now. But what's really exciting, in my view, was wanted to actually put this into practice from an economic development point of view as well. And so just about a month and a half ago, we opened the SDG Idea Factory, which is a small business incubator in our city. It's the first UCLG local action hub in North America as well. So we partnered with UCLG amongst others. And it's a small business incubator. We're very much, I should have said at the beginning, Kitchener's an hour west of Toronto. It's very much a technology and innovation-based community. And so we have a number of startup incubators and accelerators already, but this one's specifically dedicated to the SDGs. and small businesses that are focused on sustainability, social enterprises, on women-led businesses, and on businesses led by equity-seeking groups. And so I can tell you that the response to it so far has been fantastic, and it's something that we look forward to building on over the next number of years. In the lead up to its opening and continuing, we've been doing monthly SDG talks and bringing in speakers, which has been a great way of trying to get more of the community engaged and aware of what the SDGs are. As we heard one of our colleagues on the video talk about, I mean, there is, all this, there is some negativity that we all need to deal with around, and I mean, the 15-minute communities that Paris and others have been advocating hasn't helped, right? And the conspiracy theories around it and globalist agendas and so on. And yet, I think when you actually bring it back to the realities of what all this is, people are actually quite, interested and excited about the opportunities. And so certainly as a community, our council's been quite engaged and excited about it. And as I said, later on, when you get into next steps, I'll talk a little more about some of the work that we're doing around that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And then it's very wonderful. And then also take a look at your website, and I thought, SDG, the Idea Factory is very fascinating developments, which the economic, like the entrepreneurs, and then the social, and then the environment aspects is integrated in that. So it's very fascinating. So, maybe I'm looking forward to hearing next steps in the following discussions. So thank you very much. And then maybe I would like to ask Reynald first, about your experience of the first, voluntary local review in Tanzania, which is the city of Mwanza. And then I think you are deeply involved in the part of the VLR process of the Mwanza. So what are the main lessons you learned from the process, especially the what kind of the roles of the stakeholders, and then somehow the engagement and partnerships?
Thank you very much, and I will join my fellow panelists to thank you for having me. It's quite an honor for me. It's my first VLR exercise, so I think amongst the panelists, I'm the newbie in the VLR processes. First of all, I think one thing that I find quite interesting with the VLR processes is the administrative structures. All the experiences I'm hearing, it's quite different how countries are set up locally, like the setups in the local authorities. So it's quite interesting to learn from the other panelists. So one thing about the Mwanza experience, first it was a twinning VLR between the city of Mwanza and the city of Tampere in Finland, but also the kind of partnerships that were brought in by Habitat. I think Martino will explain further on that. So you had civil society, we had the twinning cities, Mwanza and Tampere, and then you have private sector. You had the UN coming in, providing the coordination and the leadership in the exercise. So we came in as stakeholders, but also what was our main interest was community engagement. So not only stakeholders and, like private sector, civil society, but really what we feel should be the role of VLRs is the community aspect. We feel that adds so much value, and it differentiates VLRs from VNRs. VNRs are high level. So if you leave out the community aspect, while this is a local authority, local level exercise, I think you continue leaving behind, the large part of the communities and the people. We believe that the SDGs are happening at the lower, community levels. So our experience and our assistance, or our role was to assist the city of Mwanza to engage communities. And we did so by conducting what we call as the Leave No One Behind hearings. So these are community hearings, community workshops that happened at the community level. So engaging the normal community members. And also what was interesting was now translating the SDGs language into simple language. Things like the communities would identify with, like how easy is it for you to access healthcare instead of using the SDGs indicators. So how stressful is it for you to send your children to school? So these are the kinds of questions and the kinds of things that community members would identify with easily. So that was our main role, because again, as I said, we believe that VLRs could also connect to VNRs. So it's a first step to engaging a wider community for them, and then you have the VNR, which is more high level. And if you listen to VNRs, there's similarities. It's central government, a ministry somewhere coordinating everything. And then there's very little engagement of communities. So for us, our interest was also to see how can VLRs be linked to VNRs. So this was our first, and it happened in a year that also Tanzania was reporting. So it's been quite interesting seeing how the process in Mwanza could be some sort of a pilot process to inform the current VNR that Tanzania is doing, but also how that can be replicated in future VNRs. So again, for us was the Leave No One Behind component of VLRs, and that was our interest. Again, Habitat, Martino here would explain. I'm sure he has a broader experience in VLRs, but on that specific example. But the partnerships was also quite a unique element of it, because again you had many stakeholders, each one with a clear role in the VLR process.
Thank you very much, Reynald. Thank you so much. Yes, very impressive for the no one left behind hearings, and also your strategy to have community involved, and then go up to the the community kind of interest into the more local and also regional and national. So it's very, very interesting to hear the story. Okay, thank you very much. I will come back to you later. And then thank you very much for waiting. So I would like to introduce the Mr. Martino Miraglia, the Human Settlement Officer, SDG Localization and Local Governments, UN Habitat. So the UN Habitat has been supporting voluntary local process, also advocating more cities to join that movement. So maybe through that experience, you have seen a lot of voluntary local processes, including Mwanza. So what do you see, what kind of the main lessons you have, and also what kind of impact voluntary local process brought to the localization process of the city, for the years?
Thanks a lot, and sincere apologies for being late. Well, I'm talking on behalf of UN Habitat, but I've seen you have many cities that have been leading really this exercise in the past years, and the merit goes to our local and regional governments, really. So I'm talking on behalf of the UN, but cities are driving forward this agenda. One quick, I'll take a step back, as actually Barry did, I was also there when the post-2015 agenda was discussed and the whole agreement around the goals, and we were leading with the colleagues of UNDP, the Global Task Force dialogue on the post-2015, on the localization of the post-2015 agenda, and we were advocating at the time. It was only advocacy, trying to make sure that local action and governments would be at the center of these global agendas. Well, I think that thanks to your work, we came quite far. And just to mention here, in the context of HLPF, we see we are counting 30 plus side events of member states dedicated to the localization of the SDGs, some VNRs looking into local level, and really transversal action, looking at the transversality of local action for sustainable development, but also more and more local governments being part of national delegations. I know it's not the first for many countries, but some still have to get there, and we're closing the gap. But also another example would be 4 weeks ago, we were in Nairobi. Stefan, you were actually there for the UN-Habitat Assembly, where the localization of the SDGs resolution was approved. So actually, local governments and local action have never been so central. Resolution of localization, which was, by the way, endorsed by both Finland and Argentina, two cities that are represented on this table. So getting to the VLR topic, I think that the voluntary local reviews have contributed dramatically to this push in the past couple of years, as piggybacking, if I may, on the process of the VNR, cities were able to put their effort at the center of agendas and, let's say, forums such as the HLPF. That brought much more attention to what was happening at the local level. We have some 200 VLRs, 220 VLRs being developed around the globe by 190 local and regional governments. Big numbers. But if we count the number of local and regional governments existing around the globe, the gap to fill is huge. Okay, so how do we actually reach those that have not yet engaged in the SDGs? Because at the end, I mean, the end point of the whole VLR, and this links to the very discussion of what happens after the VLR, no, should be of implementing the SDGs. So it's very important that the cities engage in the VLR process, but the outcome is what we are looking into, right? So how do we engage, and how do we reach towards the local and regional governments that still have to really integrate, mainstream, and work on SDG on the SDGs? That's the big question. And I think that the VLR is that process. It offers those means for cities to embrace the SDGs. Now, and I will take just 2 minutes, before getting into what happens after, what happens first. No, we have. I'm sure that these are the examples that we have here in the cities. VLRs and Mariana, and being at your third, fourth VLR at this point. Today fifth. We're starting losing count. It would be interesting because we have started discussing back in 2020, at the very beginning of the VLR process. So what happens first? It's the VLR helps you to get into that political engagement process. So you reach out to your leadership to make sure, hey, SDGs are existing. How do we work around it? They help in the discussion around data at the local level. Now, taking the example of Buenos Aires and Helsinki, and comparing to what is actually in Monza, where the availability of data is much more limited. There is not a culture of collecting, of analyzing, or coordinating. There is no multi-level connection with the National Statistical Office. That's what happened first. That's what the VLR helps. And then with the help of associations and stakeholders, such as the one gathered by the UN Association in Tanzania, really it starts mobilizing the community. Now, what is all of this? It's a platform. The VLR, at the end of the day, acts as a platform, as a catalyst for something else to happen. And what is that something else? In the immediate, I think it's the revision and the strengthening probably of local planning. So it offers some insights on how to reorient our local plans towards more sustainability. It offers insights on how to reorient our policies and budgeting. but I think first and foremost, I think it helps us to engage the community and to move towards common goals. For me, the most important transformation probably is specifically seeing some of our member states' governments going towards certain directions is the cultural and societal transformation, bringing communities together, making understanding and sustainability is something very important and needs to be put at the center of our communities' agendas and action. It's what, in my opinion, should happen after the VLR, building on that stakeholder engagement like the one that happens in Monza. I will stop here. We'll have much more technical insights, but I think this will be the key messages. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you for sharing your insights, and then so kind of lots of development of the voluntary local review, and then I'm also taking a look at the voluntary local processes, and then we found the thoughts of the local government has been changing a lot through the voluntary local processes. So their thoughts is more SDG oriented. Also, they are very care about the data and the partnerships and community involvement. So such kind of the changes they bring in by the voluntary local processes. So I'm glad to hear this this is first time for me to joining high-level political forum, and then but I very glad to see lots of the local government's views on kind of the subnational discussions is taking at lots of events, and also national governments talking about subnational roles. So it's very impressive, for the, and then also the that voluntary local review is kind of the breaking that, is contributing that kind of the positive developments, I think. So thank you so much. And then I go to the second round of the questions, maybe from the city perspective. So for Buenos Aires, Mariana. So I think I asked same questions before, but I think you have done the 5th voluntary local reviews. So have you been able to maintain the support of the process, and then what are the challenge between your processes?
Well, it haven't been easy, let me tell you. No, I mean, first of all, and I think you'll hear this a lot this week, it's political will, right? Mm-hmm. From our leaders, from decision makers, not only to pursue the localization of the SDGs, but also to achieve them, right? I think we're focusing a lot on how we localize them, how we report the SDGs, and I get it, I know it's important, but we also have 7 years left. Mm-hmm. So, it's hard. But then over the years, so as we update our VLR annually, each year has looked different. Mm-hmm. So the first one, it was everything new. We were very proud to have our first report. Great. 2020. Mm-hmm. We were making it, COVID hit. So the HLPF didn't prioritize any goals those year in 2020. Mm-hmm. So we selected the ones that were fundamental for crisis management, but also for the day after, right? When the city opened, how we were going to keep on track with the SDGs. And in the General Secretariat and International Relations, we have many projects that depends on data from other government areas. So the way we found, when half of the city was advocated to crisis management, was to streamline all the processes and make it almost automatic, with the other projects, and that's how we updated it. Then on 2021, that served the same thing, but we started revising our indicators, our goals, our targets, because obviously things had changed a lot. Mm-hmm. 2022, and also many strategic plans on strategic agendas were being created, like our climate action plan that had some really important goals, which will become carbon neutral by 2050. So it was also about being coherent. Mm-hmm. I know it sounds basic, but sometimes in a big government structure that's really hard. Mm-hmm. So using the same indicators, measuring the things the same way. And this year, since we were publishing all the SDGs, we decided to call the interministerial meeting that I was mentioning earlier again. We started a new process of discussing the goals. I think it's something, although we published the VLR, I think it's something we have to keep doing this year to also for the next government to continue it, and how we can leave it as a legacy so the next administration also is committed to publishing the VLRs. And going back to what Martino was saying about what happened first, is it the data or, I think the way we also found to keep the VLR relevant after all this time, it's our main international accountability tool. Our main audience for the VLR, are you, right? International organizations, other cities around the world, of course, local cities, but it's not the regular citizen. We're trying to make it more user-friendly, let's say more, digestible, I guess. But we know which our main audience is. And so we have also linked it to our international positioning strategy. So I think the VLR is the translation of our government plan to our international audience in an international positioning strategy, and how we're trying to promote Buenos Aires as a great city to live, to visit, to study, and to do business in. And you can only be that if you have great quality of life, right? And that's what our government plan tries to do. So we just put it in a international language, let's say. Also, when data is a challenge, I know it is, and we still have that challenge. For instance, some of our indicators are from national sources, right? What we try to do was to be as close as the global and national indicators as possible, so we can also assure some comparability with other cities around the world, other regions, but that's not always easy, and that doesn't always show the reality at the local level, right? In terms of the national census, let's say for social demographic data, it's every 10 years. That's over 2 administrations. So we added complementary indicators that are from local sources. For instance, we have an annual household survey. That's a really great tool, and we're analyzing if we are switching the national census one for those. We also add management and result-based indicators. For instance, how many kilometers of bike lanes does the city have? Because this promotes our, sustainable mobility plan. So I think, and what you were saying about all of them look different, I think that's great. I think that's also what keeps them relevant. So you can use it to your own needs in the city. Of course, trying to keep some objectivity and some, methodology, by all means. But I think we can take that license of make it work for us and for our needs at that time,
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's lots of the experience and thoughts. Thank you so much. Maybe, thank you so much. And then, maybe, we have one more event, to hear all about your experience. Maybe. Okay, thank you so much. And then maybe I come back to the Billy about the next step of the Kitchener of the SDGs, and also some sorts of the voluntary local reviews, if I may.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And maybe I'll touch both on it, sort of a perspective from specifically City of Kitchener, but also bring in a little bit of from UCLG, more global perspective. So as I said, we're now in the midst of finalizing our new strategic plan. It will guide us as a city for the next 20 years, which will obviously take us even beyond 2030. So whatever follows the SDGs will, obviously be part of that continuation. But certainly the first 4 and even the next one that'll follow will adopt it. But what's really exciting and interesting in the work that we're doing is that we're going to be applying the new United Nations Research Institute for Social Development, Sustainable Development Performance Indicators for the first time into our work, assessing the performance within sustainability thresholds, which respect achieving the SDGs. And as part of that, we're also going to use a multi-capital scorecard to measure economic, social, and environmental impact of the actions undertaken within the strategic plan. The intent of that is to, number one, hold both the elected officials and staff publicly accountable in terms of being able to share these indicators and how we're doing as a community. But also it will help lead into actually doing a formal VLR in the future, or several formal VLRs as a city going forward. We haven't done formal VLRs up till now. As I said, we've participated in a number of data things in the designation through the World Council on City Data and so on. But we think this is an important next step as we go forward. From a more global perspective, I actually, and the work that UCLG is doing, we really are at a critical point. I just came back on the weekend from the U20 in India, in Ahmedabad, and when you think about it, this week, followed by the SDG Summit that's going to take place in September, followed by the Summit for the Future, which will take place next year. These are really 3 critical points for the local and regional government family in terms of making sure that national governments understand the importance of subnational governments in delivering the goals and objectives that are found in the SDGs, but also in other global priorities like the Paris Agreement and others. And so, there was a real recognition in the communique that came out of that meeting that's going to the G20 leaders, that this is an opportunity that can't be missed. And I think it was further emphasized actually in a tweet about a day ago by UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And I'm going to share that because I think it does speak to it both from a UCLG and the city of Kitchener and any city perspective. And the tweet read, "Unless we act now, the global goals could become an epitaph for a world that might have been. We are at a moment of truth and reckoning, but together we can make this a moment of hope for a better future." And why does he say that? Because when we look at the picture of SDG progress at the midpoint, out of the SDG targets, 15% are on track, 48% are moderately or severely off track, and 37% have stagnation or regression. I would argue as local governments, we were the ones, quite frankly, that even when national governments weren't pushing things like climate change and the accord after COP15 and the lead up to COP21, that really pushed the agenda. And I really think that local governments need to be the ones that push national governments now into over the next, this year and over the next number of years around really cranking up our efforts in order to make significant progress in the goals and ultimately start the work on whatever is going to follow 2030 as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing thoughts. Yeah, it's great to see, and then the importance of the subnational governments to pushing national, international agenda is become more and more important. And then, yeah, you are kind of the long history to working on that. So it makes, things, changing, things, that we want to see more changes in the future. Thank you very much. And then that's all. And then I go to the Martino about the questions. So I think the habitat, the promoting SDG localization and voluntary local reviews, and then the So and then also the data things, always the matter, and then including the maybe the data issues, how do you think the cities can overcome that challenges of the data, and if you have any other, the main challenges, how the cities can challenge it.
Thanks a lot. Well, the issue of data is a complicated one, I think. I'll start from that, and then I'll go a bit further, in the sense that it's a process. It's something that needs to be built throughout time. It's something that needs many different components of a city administration coming together, and certainly doesn't stop at the city level, but it goes up eventually to regional, state, county level, and ultimately at the level of at the national government. In the experiences that I have, and I have to admit, I work on VLRs, but I failed all my exams at statistics at university. Don't ask me about going there, but still, I think I understand how these processes work. So the reality is that in order to create such a system, financing and investment is the first thing, because there is the need to create data. There is the need to collect those data, to have the technologies to collect the data that are actually relevant, then to measure progress against certain indicators. So that is certainly something that needs to be strengthened. The second level is the one of coordination. VLRs have given a strong push towards reflection on data at city level, and we are witnessing really a struggle within many countries, not only certainly in developing ones, but I'm looking at my own country, Italy, where like probably at the metropolitan city level we are able to collect reliable data and on very few indicators. So that's certainly not an issue for developing countries. And that issue is about coordination across levels, where the National Statistical Institute needs to be, supported and supporting cities to develop their data ecosystems. And the third level, so that's the financial, the local, the coordination, and going internationally. I think that sometimes there is a bit of confusion which should be the indicators of reference, right? There are so many indexes measuring urban, measuring local development, and then you have a SDG set of indicators which is mainly made for member states, and then every local and regional government, like Mariana was mentioning, is to adapt while looking at the national level. So coherence, it's very complicated. So from UN Habitat, we have added a bit of complication, but I'm joking. But we have actually tried to untangle those knots and creating the global urban monitoring framework, which tries to align different existing indexes and to measure the urban dimension of sustainable development. We have worked with Reynald and a colleague of Monza, and thanks to the support of Finland in Monza, in piloting that exercise. It has been extremely difficult to collect data against those indicators, but again, it's a process that we hope to strengthen. Now, what is the advantage of it? And I completely share the opinion of Mariana when she says that it needs to be. VLRs do not need to be the same, actually. They are made to be tailored to the local contexts, but using some kind of harmonized indicators across them helps us to not so much compare, because the interest is not about comparing. The interest is about allocating the necessary resources then to make sure that those that are lagging a bit behind are supported. So in addition to the adoption at the local level of a set of indicators, I think that should be adopted at the national one. So indicators and frameworks that are able really to trigger down towards local level and help in measuring what is happening at the city level, adopted by national governments, is what is needed then to measure sustainable urbanization. I think I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You have a lot to say. And thank you very much for sharing your insights from the experiences. So data is always an issue and a very complicated one. But I think this kind of discussion and also the mutual learning will help each local government think about what data is necessary and what kind of the way to collect the data. So I think the Voluntary Local Review as a kickstarts of the data collections. So thank you so much. And then finally, Reynald. So I hear the very important stories of the Monza, and then you share some expectation in the future. But could you elaborate a little bit more what kind of impact you're expecting, or how you can make it happen?
Thank you. So just to reflect a little bit on the differences they're talking about, give an example of Tanzania. We have 186 local authorities that are eligible for, having VLRs. This is our first one in Mwanza. So it's a big country with, I think, different administrative structures, and these 186 LGAs we have 30 plus regions. They're all coordinated by a central ministry. So you can see the differences and how we probably hope the VLRs could inform VNR because of this huge administrative structure. I would also like to mention that I'm part of the Global Forum VLRs community of practice. So this experience is a good learning experience for us as well. My expectation is that first, VLRs do not alienate communities because we have VNRs that already does that. So I really hope in the guidelines, in everything, and in our differences, we make VLRs work as a way to engage communities in these processes. And I'll give an example of our work. My first assignment when I started working was awareness raising during the MDGs in the Pemba Island. Pemba is one part of the Zanzibar Islands in Tanzania. And I was assigned to train local government councillors, young people, about their role in the MDGs. And this was 2012, and they had no clue. No clue about any of this. But then we changed, throughout time, there's a method that we started piloting. It's called the Rights Way Forward method, where you make the communities identify what issues they think are priorities for them and sort of provide solutions. How would they go about to solve these issues? And their response was quite different. So when they understand and when the communities relate to issues and things that they feel are priorities for them, you get a good engagement. So my hope for the future is that VLRs have a way to engage communities. But saying that, I also hope VLRs also inform local government plannings. The mayor spoke about, their strategic plan. We have the same in Tanzania. So all these 186 local government authorities have their own 5-year strategic plans. So I feel like when you want these strategic plans to align with the SDGs, VLRs are way in when they start self-assessment and then, planning the next strategic when they're coming to creating their next strategic plan, it's going to be easy for them to align. Also, maybe people with more experience in data could help explain or elaborate this more. But I also see a role in administrative data in VLRs, how, you know, local government authorities collect a lot of administrative data, but it's lost somewhere. You know, it doesn't make it to the VNR, but how can this administrative data be utilized during the VLRs? We faced a challenge because it's not harmonized. It was not harmonized, but they collect routine data. So because you know, healthcare facilities, schools, they all belong to local government authorities, at least from my experience. And in Tanzania, they're all under this LGA. So they have a lot of data, but it's just not well coordinated and not well harmonized. Yeah, I am for the people, for the communities. So really my interest is to see this connection from the local level to the national, regional level, and to the global stages like this. And it was interesting to see a lot of these discussions this year, a lot of side events on localization. But I really do hope it's about how do we take it back to the communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much pointing out a very important point. In community is the standard points and also basis. So I think we have to look at the community. Also, community has a knowledge and solutions. So that solutions knowledge should be understood by the regional, national governments, and then to make everything is sustainable. So thank you very much, Reynald. So yeah, we have only 20 minutes left, but I would like to open the questions, the comments. Maybe I will take, okay, so one from there. And then, yeah, please. Yeah, please use the mic.
Good to go. Thank you very much. My name is Suzanne. I work for a civil society organisation in Ireland, Social Justice Ireland. Our organisation actually writes an annual progress index where we look at Ireland and the SDGs and the progress we make. And it probably is at odds with the VNR that the government is going to publish next week. And I'm so conscious that there's global, there's national, but we live our lives locally. And it's the disaggregated data, it's the gaps. So if we have an indicator, say Ireland performs really well on education, so you could say, okay, 90% have access, that's brilliant. It's the 10%, isn't it? And that's where the local piece, I think, really, really sits. So again, the issues we have is access to disaggregated data, those pockets, the communities that are the furthest behind, that are being left behind. But Ireland is a very centralised system. So I'm just curious to find out what is the challenges there for local authorities who don't really have a lot of clout and who don't really have a lot of access to. So even if they're aware of the issues at local level, they are reliant on national policy. So if you're looking at something like rollout of broadband, if you're looking at something like access to public transport, they don't have access to revenue raising at local level. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on, I suppose, the difficulties when everything is very centralised. And thank you so much. It's a fantastic panel. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, yeah. Could you make your question? Yeah, you first and then the second.
Thank you very much. First of all the work that you have done, it's amazing. And my question, I'm part of the group of youth people here, and my question is about inequalities. So all of you were mentioned about how to report and to disaggregate this type of discrimination and to make easy the engagement of people or civil people about the SDGs. But what about like the signal people, well, the persons that speak signal language and all this type of other inequalities because of injuries or something like that. So there's any type of plan in long, medium, or term solution to provide this type of content to all those persons that do not even speak a United Nations official language, or even as normal language or a currently language that we do understand, but that type of persons or indigenous people do not, and how can you as the major group can make it?
Thank you so much. I'm working for the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development from Botswana. Thank you so much for the interesting discussions and the enlightening discussions. So I wanted to find out, maybe from Barcelona, where you have done 3 VLRs, have you seen them influencing policy decisions or changing the landscape? Because the whole idea is not about just having the data, but having the action to say, if now you have this kind of data, it can influence some certain changes. And then another point that I wanted to maybe forward to UN Habitat is on the community-led data collection, the ones that we call Know Your City campaign. From my experience, we have once done the Know Your City campaign, and I found that the data that is collected by the community is the data that we should be using because it's more disaggregated. But the challenges that we have is that the data doesn't meets the national statistics standards. And how do we work with national statistics offices to make sure that that data is standardized? Because it is the data that is very accurate and very true rather than the data that is produced at national level. And then another challenge that I observed when doing my study was on the political term, like the continuity process, where we have political leadership, 5-year term, it ends, and then the continuity processes. How have you dealt with that, and how has it worked on your case? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the it's a difficult questions and the time is limited. So could you make your answer short, and then maybe for the data thanks, Martino, could you elaborate that?
Sure. I think well, on the it's a bit of a transversal discussion when it comes to the involvement of communities and stakeholders within the production of VLR or collection of data for whatever process we are taking into consideration. So it's, in my opinion, it's the community-led or collected data and information. It's very important. It also needs to go with quantity. With the numbers, let's put it like this, that you can get from the National Statistical Office or others. The problem of those numbers is that they're not disaggregated. So we don't get to the granular level that allow us to understand the challenges of communities, the challenges of each and every neighbor. That's where the community-led data fills the gap. That's where we actually need to combine those sources for us to have a better understanding. Now, linking to the work of UN Habitat, we work at, especially, we're trying to integrate the work that some colleagues have been doing for the past and many years, the Urban Lab on spatial analysis, and that's what I think should be the next step of voluntary local reviews. And Buenos Aires has done it, and others, such as La Paz, really looking at the neighborhood level challenges. So at the different layers that each and every neighbor has to be confronted to. And I will leave it here for the other panelists.
Yeah, maybe time is very limited. So maybe, I would like to ask the rest of the speakers with the final comments, and maybe include, some answer to the one of the questions. So maybe please limit yourself to the 1 minute, just 1 minute's comments, final comments.
Yeah, so as we were telling, and obviously data is a huge challenge. Our mayor actually says that we cannot change what we don't know, and we don't know what we cannot measure. I think it sounds better in Spanish, but I think, it works, right? So what you were saying about what we can do as local governments, I think it's been more pragmatic and go into those % of populations that don't have access to certain services, or the inequality gap is really big when you zoom in, right? So, for instance, and what you were saying about public transport, let's say 97% of the population in Buenos Aires has a public transport stop within 5 blocks from their homes. So it's focusing on that 3%. And here, I think, is where our international partners come to play and can help us, and how they can actually finance those studies that it's for such a low % that maybe we don't have the resources to do it. We did an SDG accelerator lab with UNDP. I think that's a great initiative. It was focused on SDG 16, using the tools from SDG 16, but focused on gender, mobility, and safety in a slum, in a vulnerable neighborhood in Buenos Aires. And we use traditional data, non-traditional data. We collected data on real time, qualitative and quantitative data. So I think that's where all our partnerships and everything that we do comes back to the local level. And that also allows you to tailor-made solutions for that such small percentage of population. And really quickly, regarding inclusivity, I think we have a lot to do in that regard. We publish our VLR in English and Spanish. We try to be as descriptive as we can in our website for non-sighted people, but I think we still have a lot to do. And when I was telling what I was saying about making it more user-friendly, I know a PDF of 120 pages. It's not user-friendly, and our indicators are really boring, Excel at the end. And I think there are some good initiatives about how to make it more interactive and more user-friendly, but it takes time, it takes resources, and then you have to update it. So that you also have to keep in mind, also when you select indicators, the number of times I had to remove an indicator, But yeah, we are thinking about that, and it's not that it's not a priority, but it's hard to do it. And that also can be financed by international organizations. And in that note, I think when we do these really cool initiatives, we have to make it, we have to document it, we have to make it so it can be replicated by other cities. That's also maximizing resources, right? So this lab that I was telling you about, you can take the software and basically put in data from any neighborhood in any city of the world, and the information would change for you. So I think that's more or less. And sorry, one thing, political terms ending. That's I think it's really huge. After all these years, and if the administration is ending, I really hope that the next one takes what we have done and continue it and improve it. But that also comes with institutionalization. That's a hard word. We're trying to pass a law, that it's not specifically about the SDGs, but it's like a form or a model of management that the city has, but that has to be aligned to the SDGs. So that's our first step. And also taking international commitments is really hard for a new government that comes in to disregard international commitments. So I think that's another one. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I first, maybe Reynald, you have final comments in 1 minute, and then I would like to Mayor to conclude the discussion.
Thank you. I think coming from a stakeholder, someone who wants nobody to be left behind, I would continue to insist on, community engagements, but also share, even though I'm not from the government, but also share an experience from Tanzania. I think we have the same structure where LGAs, even though they have access to some own sources of funding, but also our planning processes allow LGAs to submit their own development priorities, and then the national budget is allocated according to their priorities. So we have somewhat of a similar structure, but also they are allowed to retain some of taxes, for instance, that are collected within the local authorities' own sources of funding. But the priorities, the finances, even if they submit their development priorities, but the funding is decided centrally. So I still think VLRs could play a huge role in informing these decisions in the future. But also, again, coming from stakeholders, inclusivity is what we are about, leaving no one behind. I am with you in making sure that all these processes are inclusive, as much as, funding or resources is usually the biggest argument, the to-go-to argument that there's not enough resources, but I think more should be done and more can be done. So thank you.
Thank you very much. The ability to conclude this discussion very briefly. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And I think, obviously from what we've all heard this evening, I think it's clear that this is something that local governments are very passionate about. There's a great deal of engagement in different regions of the world. I think in my sort of closing comments, I'll reference a couple things that folks may want to take a look at from a UCLG point of view. So one of the things that UCLG does every 3 years is a gold report. And so these have been going back now since 2008. The first one was on decentralization. Then in 2011, it was on local government finance. The next one was on basic services. Gold 4 was focused on sustainable, inclusive, safe, and resilient cities. Gold 5 was actually the localization of the global agendas back in 2019, and the most recent one that was released as part of our Congress last year in Korea is actually focused on addressing inequalities, which speaks exactly to your question, and it gives a great sort of analysis of what cities are doing in different parts of the world in that regard. And so I'd reference people to the UCLG web site, because you can find all those gold reports there. And so that's at www.uclg.org. The gold reports are found at gold.uclg.org/reports. But the other part that's in here is actually a lot of documents around the work that's being done on localizing the SDGs globally, as well as some training programs that UCLG has been providing to support local governments in doing that. So I would encourage people to access those resources or refer others to them if you haven't been doing it already. And then the last point on back to the inequality piece from a City of Kitchener point of view, as we've developed our new strategic plan, we actually looked at who we've been hearing from historically and in this round of our residents. And we actually realized through that process that there were certain groups, often marginalized groups, that are the ones that we should be hearing from the most, but we were hearing from, in fact, the least. And so we actually initiated a very targeted campaign where we went to them. We created environments where they could participate and engage, and so that we could actually get their input into the new plan that's coming forward. Because if we truly say that we don't want to leave, no one behind, then it means that we actually have to hear from everyone so that we understand how we won't leave anyone behind or any place behind. And so I think that's where really taking some time in your engagement processes to look at the data and then figure out where those gaps are, and then filling those gaps is really critical. Thank you.
Thank much, Mayor, and then thank you very much. And then there is only the few minutes left, but I would like to thank for everybody and every panelist, and I would like to go back to the Carl for the conclusions, and then.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for spending the end of a long day at the start of a long week with us here. But the conversation was great, and I hate to be the person to end it. I'm left truly inspired by the work we're doing, but with so many more questions. So I hope throughout the week we can continue to have these conversations about SDG localization and the VLRs. I will make one little plug here. If you are interested in kind of connecting with the network of VLRs and the community, we have a little survey here. We'd love you to just scan the QR code. It's a way to kind of see who's participating today. This is not just for whoever's in person here in the audience, but if you are joining virtually or watching the recording, please also scan the QR code and fill out the survey. It will help us build the network of SDG localization. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.